The UFC is no longer going to be with ESPN, and the pay-per-view model is dead in 2026. Finally, it's great that they are, I think. Now, the common question is, how are they going to pay fighters pay-per-view points, such as champions and superstars? Well, Paramount has bought the media rights for $7.7 billion, and the deal is for 7 years, so that would equate to $1.1 billion every single year for the UFC. They don't need pay-per-view anymore. They don't need pay-per-view to pay the fighters, pay the superstars, the champions, all that sort of stuff. And to compare that to ESPN, ESPN paid them $1.5 billion. It's a huge difference, and I'm actually surprised. Now, Paramount's going to be paying the UFC lesser early and then more later during that 7-year run. By how much, we have no idea, but that's what they wanted to do. And it's going to be interesting, man, because right now in the UFC, there isn't that big superstar like a Conor McGregor, like a Brock Lesnar. But I think with them getting rid of pay-per-view, it doesn't even matter at that point. Now it's all about viewership and subscriptions. And they're not really reducing the amount of cards a year. There's going to be 43 a year, which is roughly the same as what we have now. And it's going to be divided with 13 marquee events, as it's stated. So it doesn't say pay-per-view, 13 marquee events and 30 fight nights every year. So because they're going to keep the same number of events, and probably the same number of fights for each of those events, they're probably going to have to keep 700 fighters on the roster. Because I can only imagine that every card has to be a certain length so they can place ads between fights and stuff like that, you know? So a card is most likely going to have to be a certain number of fights so they can get the most amount of money going through Paramount Plus, because they do have a subscription model. You get to watch the cards with ads for $7.99 a month. With no ads, it's $12.99. They also have an annual plan. Ad-free will be about $120 a year, but with ads, it'll be about $60 a year. Now, the only question is, will they hike up those prices? Because they've done it before. Paramount Plus with ads used to be $2 cheaper, and the ad-free plan used to be $1 cheaper. So if they get millions of new subscriptions, we'll see if they hike their prices. Because it's not only Paramount Plus, but almost all of these services do it. As a consumer, this is perfect. Like, this is absolutely amazing. The amount of money that you have to pay to watch the UFC cards up until next year is a lot, man. Over $1,000 just to watch every card. But starting next year, it's gonna be less than $200. I just hope the service is actually good, because I never really used Paramount Plus. I just hope it's good. For anybody who's used it before, leave in the comments below if you think the UFC fights are gonna play well on it. But it's great that they're doing the $12.99 subscription with no ads at all. So hopefully in between rounds, we get to see the corner and what the coaches are telling the fighters instead of breaking the immersion with the commercials. But now, because they've gotten rid of the pay-per-view model, some people are saying that they're not going to stack cards now because there is no incentive to do so. But I disagree with that, because stacking a card never really made a pay-per-view bigger. Unless you have a big star in there. The UFC would still stack cards even if it didn't mean the casual fans would watch it, simply because the casual fans just didn't know most of the fighters. I think the UFC might try to stack cards even more now, actually, because watching the fights are more affordable and accessible, meaning that they'll get more casual fans to tune in regularly. They knew before that all they needed to do was headline with a superstar, and the card sold itself. Like, look at the last few Conor cards. None of them were stacked, and they sold multiple times more than other stacked cards. Casual fans don't know or care about the other fighters. That's just what it is. As hardcore fans, we think these cards are stacked, but for the casual fans who don't know these fighters, they don't know what a stacked card looks like. Like, look at UFC 264. This is when Dustin and Conor had their trilogy fight. The co-main event was Gilbert Burns versus Stephen Thompson. Both guys not in their prime anymore, in the later stages of their career, but still a good fight, right? That was the co-main event. Tai Tuivasa versus Greg Hardy, Irina Aldana versus Yana Kunitskaya was on the main card. Sean O'Malley, not a contender at the time. I don't even think he was ranked when he fought Chris Moutinho. He was the fighter that the UFC was building up as their next star. Similar to what they were doing with Bo Nickel, but O'Malley actually became champion. The headliner of the prelims was Max Griffin versus Carlos Condit. I would guess some of the casual fans know Carlos Condit. Michel Pereira versus Nico Price. Ilia Topuria, very new to the UFC at the time, fought Ryan Hall. Dricus du Plessis, very new to the UFC as well at the time, fought Trevin Giles. Jennifer Maia versus Jessica Andrade. Brad Tavares versus Omari Akhmadov. And Zalga Zumagulov versus Jerome Rivera. In hindsight, this card looks actually crazy because Ilia and Dricus are on there, but you have to put it into context. Those are both Ilia's and Dricus's second UFC fights, you know, so definitely not a stacked card. Then their second fight between Dustin and Conor had Michael Chandler versus Dan Hooker as the co-main event. That was Chandler's UFC debut. That's a good fight. Joanne Calderwood versus Jessica Ai was on the main card. Makhmud Muradov versus Andrew Sanchez. Marina Rodriguez versus Amanda Ribas. That is an incredibly weak main card. The headliner of the prelims was Armin Saryukin versus Mafrovola, Tavares versus Shoeface, Pena versus McMahon, Praknio versus Roundtree, Evloev versus Lentz, and Albazi versus Zumagulov. Again, not a card that was stacked. And then when Conor fought Donald Cerrone on UFC 246, the co-main event was Holly Holm versus Raquel Pennington. That's a good fight for the casual fans because they all know Holly Holm. But then they had Alexei Olenek versus Maurice Green, Brian Kelleher versus Ode Osborne, Carlos Diego Ferreira versus Anthony Pettis. The casual fans probably somewhat know of Pettis. Roxanne Modafferi versus Macy Barber was the headliner of the prelims. Sadiq Youssef versus Andre Fili, Askar Askarov versus Tim Elliott, Dober versus Hakparas, Kammer versus Ledet, and Mazo versus Aldrich. So the last 3 Conor cards were not stacked, and they still sold so much more than some of the most stacked cards we have seen in recent years. Multiple times more. And the reason for that is the casual fans don't know 90% of these fighters. And that's what makes a casual fan. A casual fan is someone who doesn't really watch the sport like that. But those are the fans that are going to be massively increasing pay-per-views, right? So like these Conor cards, they actually have, I think, more of an incentive to stack the cards better, which is overall just better for the sport because it's more affordable and more accessible. Right? For ESPN Plus, you would have to get a subscription and then buy the pay-per-view, which is way too many hurdles to go through. With Paramount Plus, you just get the subscription, you can watch every single card. It's a lot better. And because of the affordability, they are generally going to have way more viewers for the fight cards. I think the regular fight nights are going to be relatively the same or even less because ESPN has a larger audience for sports, whereas Paramount Plus, I think, is more about movies and shows and stuff like that. So the regular fight night is probably going to be somewhere around the same, if not less of the viewers now, but the marquee events aren't going to be massive. Like I can imagine those get like 5 to 7 million viewers for every event. I mean, if we remember, when Cain Velasquez fought Junior Dos Santos on the first Fox card, it got over 5 million viewers live on average, and it peaked at 8.8 million. So I can imagine something similar once they bring those pay-per-view cards to Paramount, right? Because Cain versus JDS was essentially like a pay-per-view card. That's a really good example, I think, correlating to the viewership that they're probably going to get now, if not even more, because the sport has gotten bigger since then. Right, that was before the Conor era and the COVID era, which were huge for the UFC. So I think these marquee events, I said 5 to 7 million, probably more like 7 to 10 million for every marquee event. So there you go. In January of next year is going to start the new era of the UFC. Paramount Plus is where you're going to be watching these events, and some of them are going to be on CBS. And the first marquee event is going to be UFC 324. And Dana said that he'll be putting together 4 massive cards a year, one of those being the White House event, which would be great, but the expense of that would also have to mean that some of the fight nights are going to be lower quality because they're going to have to save some of the best fighters for 4 of those stacked cards a year. If they do that, then they can't put those guys on the fight nights. So some of the fight nights might be even weaker than we have now. Possibly. That's just me logically thinking about it. But we'll see. Maybe they make it work and stack the cards better than they have now, which would be great. And Dana says, with the new deal, it improves the chances of superstars like Conor McGregor and Jon Jones returning. Those are the fighters that the pay-per-view points affect the most. Conor and Jones. The negotiations will be different, pretty much based off the money that Paramount is going to give them. But then again, they've made billions of dollars already, so it doesn't really change anything. And I see some people saying that because the UFC is making so much more money that the fighters are also going to make more money. It's like, I wouldn't be too sure about that. They've already made billions of dollars already, and some of the fighters are still making 10 and 10 to fight. I don't know how much this is going to help the fighters, but it's definitely going to help the UFC, and it's definitely going to help the fans. The fighters are the only ones now that have to somehow negotiate for more money or whatever it is, or the UFC just pays them more. Maybe they just pay them more. I mean, $7.7 billion is absolutely amazing. But again, like I said before, the only thing I didn't like about this was that they didn't change the amount of events a year. There should be less, or at least less fights on a card. If they're going to have 43 cards a year, then I think every card should have like 7 fights, so that they can increase the skill level and the quality of the roster. But because they have 43 events and over 10 fights for every card, they're going to need like 600 fighters on the roster. And I just don't think there are 600 high-level fighters in the world. And that's why they keep getting these guys from the Contender Series. And some of them have become champions, some of them have become top contenders, but most of them are just run-in-the-mill replaceables, going to war in there for peanuts. I mean, look what just happened to Kazama, who just got powerbomb KO'd. He came from Road to UFC, right? Which is like the Asian version of the Contender Series. That guy got his brain crushed for some change. Hopefully the fighters are able to get more money out of this deal, and that would be great. I think overall this is a net positive for the sport. As a fan, it's absolutely amazing. It just depends on how good Paramount Plus' streaming service is. Leave in the comments below what you guys think about this Paramount deal, and I'll see you guys in the next video.